Hello and welcome to the Moonshots podcast. It's episode 272. I'm your co host, Mike Parsons, and as always, I'm joined by the man himself, Mr. Mark Pearson Freeland. Good morning, Mark.
Hey, good morning, Mike, and Happy New Year to you, to the Moonshots family, as well as all of our Moonshots members, subscribers, listeners, and viewers.
We are back fresh from a new year. None of this stupid business of reposting the back catalog. We are fresh, we are brand new. And boy, Mark, do we start with a show that we feel like is the perfect way to start January 2025.
That's right, Mike, and listeners, we're diving in and kicking off with an absolute stonker, as they say in the UK. We're going to start with Chris Guillebeau's The Art of Non-Conformity, which, Mike, is a guide, some would say, to breaking free from societal norms, creating a life of adventure, meaning, purpose. Chris Guillebeau is quite literally a man who's done quite a lot of that. He's chased the world. He's traveled, I think, probably all of the countries by now. When I
Yeah.
was researching him, he'd already done, 100 plus countries around the world to tick off his list. So he's clearly a bit of a adventurer, um, man who's living life to the fullest. So I think there's a lot that we can learn from his work today in this book. He's actually done quite a number of books, and we will be able to explore some of his others within the Chris Guillebeau series, which I'm very excited about. But today, Mike, as you mentioned, kicking off a brand new year, episode 1 in January 2025, I think the art of conformity is going to get us off to a great start.
Yes. And I think we should give a warning to our audience that this will provoke some questions. And I think the primary question is that we all should be asking, particularly at the start of a new year, is am I on track? Question mark. Am I doing the right thing? Am I living the life I choose to, wish to live? Am I living a life with purpose? Am I feeling overall satisfied and fulfilled with the things that I do each and every day? And if you're asking that question, or if you haven't asked it in a while, this show is for you because what we're really trying to do is shake things up a bit and say, are you really living the life that you want to live, or are you conforming to what others expect of you? And this book is single minded in sort of shaking things up, challenging you, asking you to reframe and rethink. And hey, maybe from this show, you might get one or two small things to configure, or maybe it's a lot more than that.
Mm.
What we know for sure, Mark, is if you liked Ikigai, designing your life, start with why, then this show is for you. Mark, I think we want to challenge ourselves. We want to be contrarian. We want to challenge the status quo. So,
Mm.
what clip are you going to unleash to start off this non-conformity show?
Well, with the subheader of the art of nonconformity being set your own rules, live the life you want, and change the world, I thought the best way for us to kickstart this first clip of 2025 is a bit of reassurance, a little bit of a call to action, and reminding us all that you don't have to live the life that others set for you.
In the face of relentless pressure to conform and pressure to avoid risks, how do we craft the life of our dreams? Or another way to put it is, how do we live a remarkable life in a conventional world? So that's the central question of the book. And I use this analogy in the prologue of jumping off the bridge, or bridge jumping. So bridge jumping comes from this experience you might have had when you were a kid, and you wanted to do something that you probably shouldn't do, and your parent or your teacher or some authority figure, said, "Jenny, why do you want to do that?" And she said, "Oh, because Candace is doing it, because Tim is doing it." And they said to her, "If everyone else jumped off the bridge, would you?" So then she's a little bit disappointed, but she realizes, hopefully, maybe it's good advice, which is all fine and well. But then we grow up, and the situation changes, kind of reverses itself, and we look around and we see that many of our peers are making the same kind of decisions. And many of our peers are kind of, on one narrow path and doing the same kind of things in terms of their education, their career, their relationships, how they think about money and debt, all kinds of things. And if we want to do something different, If we have an idea, maybe to take the road not taken, or even make our own road, even if it's not something that's confrontational, even if it's not opposed to someone else, then we often encounter this resistance. And we encounter this pressure to conform that Gretchen talked about, or this pressure to avoid risks. And so it's almost like everyone's asking us the opposite question. It's almost like everyone's saying, everyone else is jumping off the bridge. Why aren't you? What's wrong with you? And so the one sentence statement of why I wrote the book is to bring the childhood message up to adulthood application, and to say, you don't have to live your life the way other people expect you to, and you can do good things for yourself and for others at the same time. It's not a false choice. It's not a dichotomy. And here are the stories of a number of people who've done that in different ways. So, I wrote the book. There's a number of stories about me, and some people will relate to those stories and others won't, and that's okay. But then there's stories of other people, who have somehow, overcome the pressure to conform and pursued an unconventional choice, of their own. So, for example, there's a story of Susan Lewis, who's from Dallas, Texas. And Susan wanted to make a career change. She didn't actually want to be an entrepreneur. She wanted to be a part of a company or an organization, bigger than herself. But she realized, any job I apply for, there's probably going to be 100 other people, at least, applying for this job. And maybe on paper, they look as good as I do. So, how can I get around this situation? How can I circumvent the HR process? And so instead of, sending out 300 emails with her resume attached, in hopes that one company would call her back, Susan created a website called SusanHiresABoss.com and put her portfolio online and said, here's who I am and here's what I've done. And most importantly, here's what I would like to do, for the right company or organization. And I am interviewing prospective bosses. If you'd like to be considered, fill out this form. So of course that's very audacious, especially at the height of the economic crisis when unemployment was 12 to 14% in Texas. But Susan did this, and she got a lot of attention for it, and she got 12 to 14 good job offers from companies all over North America. And the company that she ended up going to work for, or the boss that she hired, to use her language, was not actually planning on expanding the organization until he heard about Susan's project. And he was just really impressed, with her initiative. And he said, I have to make room in my organization for someone like Susan.
Oh, what a great anecdote, Mark. And I think if we unpack this a little bit, the logic he's essentially presenting to us is you don't have to live a life according to what others expect of you. And here's the fundamental logic that I would offer you, Mark. We're all unique. We're all there is no other Mark Pearson Freeland. There's no other Mike Parsons. And we also know that from a biological and DNA perspective. We all have a unique genetic code, right? There's no two instances of Mark or Mike in the world. So therefore, there's no one life that can apply 100% to two people, because if we are all absolutely unique, then every life, even if it's only 1% different, needs to be unique to that person. So therefore, that to me is almost the fundamental argument about why we can entertain this idea of, well, I know there's options. I can go to college, get a job, get a house, get a partner, have a family, get a big mortgage and spend 40 years paying it off, get life insurance, hopefully make it to the end and be financially independent. But there are many different variations, colors, themes of this story. And I think we're presented with the opportunity to go, oh, maybe I take some of that. And that's what works for me. And I love this Susan hires a boss, because it's just simply her challenging the status quo, challenging the normal way of doing things and saying, well, what kind of boss do I want to find? What kind of company do I want to work for? So that might be her variation. Everything else she does may be the same as what we do, but it was that step. That's how she designed her life. And I think this clip invites us, Mark, to go and say, have I been dreaming, thinking about a life that I currently don't have? But I often come back to it. I mean, I think we all have these recurring thoughts and dreams of, oh, it would be nice if,
Mm,
right?
mm.
I think what Chris Guillebeau is doing is saying, follow up on that intuition, follow up on that consciousness of that thought and see where it takes you, right?
Yeah, big time. But it's a scary idea, isn't it? I think if you and I to run a moonshot survey amongst a lot of our listeners, and we were to say of those whom don't feel like they are following a non-conformist path, and instead they're following that group of friends or colleagues or whatever it is on the path well trodden. I think the reason why a lot of people don't go and challenge that status quo is fear. I think it's quite a scary idea, isn't it, to step out of the boundaries because you don't necessarily know exactly what's going to happen on the other side. Leaving a career of however many years you've been in there, or getting into a new college and studying a new subject and then wondering how you're going to utilize it. I think for me, at least with my career and life, it does feel as though I was brought up in a way to kind of follow a bit of a pattern. You know,
Yeah.
if you want to go and reach C, you've got to follow steps A and B in order to get there.
Yeah.
But I think what Chris is saying here, maybe we've run into some of these elements in some of the other books that we've studied on the show before, maybe Adam Grant with Originals as an example, is to try and follow something a little bit more authentic to ourselves. But that takes courage
Mm-hmm.
and confidence and a steadfast belief, not only that financially it's going to be okay, but also just to go and give it a go. It's a little bit of a big risk, isn't it?
It is, and I think it's a question of, well, what do we do if we're having these dreams?
Mm,
And I
yeah.
think what you're saying is, if it's making you a bit uncomfortable, the first thing is, if you have a recurring dream of living a different life, I mean, I would say write it down, then maybe journal about it, maybe talk to some people about it, Google about it. So what do we do then, Mark? Like, so we're starting to entertain these uncomfortable thoughts. Hey, I'm working in a bank, but I really want to be a butcher.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, that's
Mhm.
pretty radical
Mm.
change. We've been thinking and writing on it. Well, what do we do then, Mark? Like, what do you think? How do we start making small steps?
Well, if we were to follow the work of Chris's book, and of course we'll get into some more of his fascinating insights and tips later on, he would initially say, Mike, if you and I were chatting to him right now, he'd say, well, go out and challenge the societal norm. You know, go out and push the boundary,
Hmm.
see what else is out there. But realistically, I think that takes a little bit, that's kind of the next step, isn't it? Instead, for me, if I was that banker trying to get into a life of butchery,
Hmm.
instead I'd take a step back and I'd think, okay, well, this is clearly something that I'm curious about. How long have I been curious about this? And is it something that I'm particularly passionate around? Maybe I would go so far as to really set personal goals. Maybe those goals are to understand whether it is something that I want to go out and achieve. Maybe it's a goal just to say, hey, by the end of the month, I'm going to make a decision. Or maybe by the end of the month, I've done a shift as a butcher for one day in that month to
Right.
see whether I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Another thing that you could do is start to really review why your decision has come around. Because I tell you what, for some people, when you're thinking about changing your job, it just comes down to the grass seems greener on the other side.
Ah,
So it's
totally,
not
totally.
always a
Yeah.
calling to say, hey, I want to go out and be a butcher.
Yeah.
Instead, it might just be that that particular banker is struggling a little bit at the moment with a pressing deadline or an uncomfortable situation. So I would say, I would recommend to really review the situation that you're feeling and that you're in and see whether that drive to go out and be like a butcher and follow that non-conformist path is something that's born out of a true innate desire or maybe something a little bit more reactionary. Do you know what I mean?
Yep, I do. So I think what do these dreams look like that we need to see? So I've
Mm.
got a little bit of a list here, and we'll play one of our famous games. You tell me which one you think are the most common ones. Okay, so I want you to imagine, here's just a list of what people dream of doing, but they don't have the confidence to break with conformity and go and pursue these. Okay, so one of them might be advocating for social change and inspiring others. Another one might be getting fit or running a marathon. Another one might be learning a new skill, maybe drawing or water painting. Another one might be, classic one, writing a book. Another one might be traveling to a new country. Another one might be finding a dream career that is your hobby at the moment. Or lastly, volunteering for a nonprofit or a charity. These are just some of the common things people are often harboring, which are closer to their life's purpose. From that list, which one do you think, from your friends, family, and things that you come across in your world, which ones are the most common?
I mean, Mike, straight off the bat, I think career change or dream career,
Yeah,
that's got to be number one, isn't it? I would expect the majority of people to say, ah, if only I could make money from my hobby or my
right,
passion.
right.
Having said that, advocating social change, volunteering, as we've discussed on the show before, those are amazing methods to really feel good about what you're contributing towards the
Correct,
world and
correct.
how you are finding a little bit of purpose in life, in
Mm,
life's crazy journey. I think volunteering, anchoring yourself to a kind of social bit of justice or change, those are great ways of feeling a little bit more settled and in line with your
totally.
why, isn't
Because
it?
think about it like this, like maybe your job's not that boring. It's just that it's the only major adventure in your life. So maybe you need to have a big travel holiday plan.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to work for a local charity on the weekend. And that might totally reframe how you think about your job. Doesn't
Yeah. Big,
necessarily always have to be about massive career change.
mm,
But I think pursuing a path of logic and curiosity towards these, so that, and I think the blessing here is you don't have to follow the playbook that
mm.
everybody else expects you to play. If Susan hires a boss, that is like, that just shows you that that initiative lays, it's a choice that we all have, much like the initiative to become a member of the Moonshots podcast, Mark.
That's right, Mike. It is a family that grows. It's the family that shares holidays, that celebrates New Year adventures, and also comes together to support the Moonshots podcast. And those members for us are kind of like Moonshots family. And as always, we like to call them out and celebrate them and high five them as they run past our ears. So please welcome in Bob, Dietmar, Marjan, Connor, Lisa, Sid, Mr. Bonjour, and Paul. Berg, Kalman, Joe, Christian, Samola, Barbara, Deborah, and Lasse, Steve, Craig, Ravi, and Evert, Raul, Nikawada, Ingram, and Dirk, Venkata, Jet, Roger, Steph, Raw, Diana, Christoph, and Denise, Laura, Mike, Antonio, and Zachary, Austin, Ola, Andy, and Diana, Margie, Jasper, Fabian, and Guhong, Edward, Lars, Sabiha, and Samyak, including a few new members there, Mike, individuals that have joined us in 2025. Thank you guys so much for being part of the Moonshots family and going on this adventure with us to learn out loud from superstars and ideas from around the world.
Absolutely. Big thank you. And remember, if you want to support the podcast, head over to moonshots.io, become a member, and you get access to an entire separate podcast, the Moonshots Master Series, that is only for our members. So head over to moonshots.io. So, Mark, we've kind of opened up this world of non-conformity, but you're leaving us hanging. There's so much more work to do. I mean, what's next in this journey?
Yeah, we might be sitting back thinking, okay, this is easy. The
Yeah.
book about non-conformity, it's just about jumping off bridges,
Yeah.
or just following our own dreams and figuring it out. But really, Chris goes a level deeper within the book, and it's justice to his work that we need to really dig into a little bit more around the insights of the art of non-conformity. So the next clip we're going to hear from Chris is actually this idea of a bit of a value exchange, I might call it, Mike, and how we need to give in order to receive.
Something that I think is missing, from the whole conversation about alternative life and work, is this question of contribution. The question, what can we contribute instead of just what can we consume, or how can we engage instead of detach? And so that's why I say that the two most important questions in the universe are, number one, what do you really want to get out of life? Because a lot of people don't know what they want. So I think if they can figure that out, that's great. But then number two, what can you offer the world that no one else can? So that's that question of contribution, the question of engagement. And it's good to say, when we talk about contribution, it's not entirely a selfless act. It's not a sacrificial thing, at least not entirely, because we ourselves benefit, as we contribute, and we ourselves are made better as we seek to answer that question of contribution. So it's good for everyone. And my story is, after 9/11, I was depressed like everyone else, and just asking myself the big questions of life. And my wife and I are talking about, like, what can we do, and is there a way we can respond? How can we do something to give back? And it was out of that situation that we ended up moving to West Africa and living in Sierra Leone and Liberia for about 4 years, volunteering for a medical charity. And it was just the most amazing, transformative experience of our lives. It was very good for us. And we would come back to the States every year or so, and we would talk with people about what we were doing. And people would say things like, "Oh, that's amazing. How sacrificial of you." And we realized pretty quickly, to become uncomfortable with that kind of dialogue, because we would say, "Oh, it is great, that we can do this. And it is wonderful that we can be a part of something bigger than ourselves, and that we can, help an organization that's working in post-war, post-conflict countries. And that's good. And people's lives are being made better through that. But, it's not the whole story. The whole story is that our lives are being made better through this also. And we are also being changed. So really, this is the best decision that we've ever made, And so that's why I call it almost, it's like a selfish generosity. As we seek to answer that question of contribution, then we ourselves are made better. So when you put all these things together, along with this opportunity to embrace life as a meaningful adventure, instead of something to be lived to its most efficient state all the time, along with the imperative to really think about contribution, to think about what we can give and how we can engage. I think what it all comes down to is a question of legacy, of what will our legacy be, and what are we building, and what kind of story do we hope to tell with our lives, and what will the ultimate impact of our lives be. And I think of legacy as having nothing to do with money, nothing to do with inheritance, even career. It's certainly nothing that we think about at the end of our lives, looking back when we can't really make any changes. But rather, legacy is something to think about from whatever stage, in our life we're in.
Mark, the big question that I love, like I've often said on the show, like if you want one question to like spark yourself into action, it's what's your legacy going to be when you're no longer walking on the planet? And to me, the way you get to that and a stepping stone is this idea. We did a whole series on servant leadership. And really, the best way to grow yourself is to contribute to those around you. If you are in service to others, doing things for others, that is actually the path to not only like growing as an individual, but leaving a legacy. Like you will be remembered by your contribution, right? How you helped others, how you made others feel. And I think that if you think about the first clip and, we were, playing with this idea of you have these dreams and they're a bit different to what other people's expectations are. But maybe it's a little uncomfortable. Do you really have to do it? Do you have a regular thing happening? I don't think I need to change so much. Well, one thing that like gives me a swift kick up the butt is like, okay, so what's going to be the culmination? What is the sum of all your work? What is your legacy? How have you helped others? How have you contributed? What's the impact that you've had? What can people point at and say, Mike was great, Mark was great? And oh boy, if you're feeling a little indecisive about following your path, this question, like, what's your legacy? Woo, that gets me out of the seat every time, right?
Yeah, and I like that. I think you're totally right. There's a mantra that I have that I read every single day, and I tick it off every single day when I feel like I've satisfactorily met it. And it goes as follows. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And a very similar quote as you were just alluding to as well, Mike, that's Maya Angelou. And I think you're right. When we think about legacy, not only is that for your family, for your children, setting them up for a perfect schooling experience, as well as maybe a bit of retirement for yourself. It's actually kind of bigger than that, isn't it? We all spend so much time in our local community, rubbing shoulders with neighbors and so on. But you also get so distracted with work, with life, and everybody else kind of gets deprioritized.
Yeah.
It's the Mark show when
Yeah.
I'm in my own stressed head,
Yes.
isn't it? You kind of internalize everything inside. But when you, like you say, think about legacy, and when I think about community, I'm actually looking at thinking, well, how can I go out and feel good about myself? And how can I contribute to the local
Mm.
situation? You
Mm.
know, as Chris, I think, was alluding to in that clip just then, the invitation for you and I, as well as our listeners and the readers of his book, is to really question, what are we giving back? How can we assume that the world would hand us everything that we want when actually what we might be contributing is just going to work
Yeah.
Monday to Friday?
Yeah.
I think a lot of the dissatisfaction that some people have with their jobs, maybe not meeting the ikigai corner of, what the world needs, is because they're not doing anything that satisfactorily benefits the world outside of their particular job role.
Exactly.
It's actually, Mike, very easy to go to your local council, download a volunteer form,
Yeah.
fill it out, and then go and join one.
Yeah.
How good would that make you feel
Yeah.
to go out and do that? You know,
I mean,
it's
like I think there's these practices, like the way I relate to it is I just have this thing, I've mentioned it on the show before. Every morning I try to make coffee for my wife.
hmm,
Um, I don't have to. She's very capable of making the coffee, but it's a little generous gift for someone else to
yeah.
start the day. And that kind of keeps me humble. Another
Mhm.
thing that I do is this is so mundane, but it's hilarious. When I cut the grass at our house, I do the neighbor's front yard as well. I
Yeah.
just do it, right?
Yeah.
And that feels actually pretty cool. It takes me no time at all.
Mm.
And I feel good for it. And that's why
Yeah.
that saying, it feels better to give
Yeah.
than to get.
Yeah.
It's
It does.
so true. And I
Mm.
think the danger is like in the pressure that when we're trying to live, pay the bills and, survive,
Mm.
that we become a bit selfish and self-orientated, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is like, if you want to grow to your best, you have to put yourself out there, help others, inspire
Mm.
others, because to your point, they'll remember how you feel, and that's your
Yeah.
legacy.
I think a very simple thing, if our listeners and viewers are thinking, okay, well, how can I bring a little bit of joy to other people? It's as simple as saying thanks to your bus driver,
Yep.
opening the door for others. I
Yep.
still let, people get on the bus before me, and a lot of people look at me as though I'm mad.
Yeah.
How come? Thank you for letting me go first, but
Yeah.
why?
Yeah.
But it's something that's very, very small and actually does contribute to, I think, putting a smile on other people's faces. And at the same time, it kind of gets me ready to look out for the behavior of others.
Yeah.
And when I notice something positive, I think, oh, that's great. That's a
Yeah.
nice behavior.
Yeah.
Those people are being non-conformists, in the words of Chris,
Yes.
because they're acting in their own unique, authentic way.
Yeah. And yeah, it just feels good. I tell you, we've got on this theme of giving, we've got a little gift to give to our listeners. We've got a little it's a little course, takes 20 minutes that you can actually do on this book. And Mark, you just did it, didn't you?
That's right. I just did it. I submitted my response into, for our listeners and members, Chat GBT, which gave me instant feedback on the reports that I wrote based on Chris Guillebeau's book, prompted by the questions that we have in our course,
Yeah.
and got instant feedback, Mike.
Yeah.
It was you and I sitting there on a video call,
Yeah.
getting the feedback within a few seconds.
Yeah.
It was very engaging, and I already have a number of different next steps that I can start to put into practice right away.
Yes.
So from course beginning to getting personalized feedback, I think it was 20 minutes, 25 minutes. So
Yeah.
for all of our listeners and members out there who want to go that little bit deeper, maybe you really want to understand and dig into the art of nonconformity, go out and give our brand new modular quiz a go
Yeah.
and let us know what you think.
Yeah. So head over to apolloskills.com. There you can take the course. We'll have a link in the show notes. So if you're really considering a life of non-conformity, as inspired by the book that we're discussing today, you can just head over there. It's all free, and it's just our way of giving back. But we've got 2 clips done. We've got a free course, but we ain't done yet, Mark.
No, we are not, Mike. I think what we've already started discussing is this idea of being adventurous, but also contributing to the world. So being a nonconformist by following our guts, but also having the foresight and the breadth of vision to remember it's not all about us. Well, what that might all ladder up to, Mike, is something that we might call a fulfilled life. Well, before we all start writing our lists of what a fulfilled life is, let's hear from Chris himself, who's going to help us understand the characteristics of those who feel as though they have a life of fulfillment.
Everybody who's successful, and by successful, I mean like absolutely fulfilled in their career, passionate about it and feeling like they're doing something that they're supposed to do. They have these 3 characteristics. And first of all, they have joy. They're happy in their work. They enjoy what they do most of the time. They're not doing a soul-sucking job. If they have a job, it's a great job. Or if it's something that they've built for themselves, they really enjoy it. And the second quality is money, because there's lots of things you can do that you enjoy, but if you don't get paid for them, then it's a hobby, which is great. Like, it's good to have a hobby, but if you're talking about a career, it has to be financially sustainable. So joy, money. And then the third factor is flow, which is really doing something that you're good at, really doing something where when you do it, you're immersed in it and the hours just kind of pass by. And it's also really easy for you because it's something that you're good at. And other people are like, wow, she's really good at that. It takes me a lot longer to do that, or I'm not good at it. But so I think what we're looking for is this combination of all 3 factors. We want something that brings joy. We want something that is financially sustainable. We want something that brings flow. And I don't think people will be happy unless they have all 3 of these factors.
Yeah.
I think you can be a little bit, you can be okay, right? There's lots of people who do jobs they don't love, and that's fine. They get a paycheck, and maybe they're satisfied in other areas of their life. But because life is short, why not try to work towards something, that is not just okay, but is amazing, right? Isn't that the goal?
Ooh, okay. So we got a little formula going there, Mark. Joy, money, and flow. Now, what is fascinating, we've done an entire series on happiness and joy. We've done 2 money series, and we've done much work on flow, including a study of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's book, Flow, which is considered to be the source of the entire concept itself. So I have a lot of thoughts on fulfillment here. When you hear him prescribing this formula, it all sounds good. Joy, money, and flow. How do you do it, Mark? Like, where do we start on this tricky adventure?
Well, you're right, Mike. I think it is potentially a little bit of a tricky one because as we learned from the happiness series, there's a truth that some of us don't really want to accept, which is that happiness is a choice.
Oh, yeah.
It's
and it's a muscle you got to work out, right?
You got it. That's exactly right, Mike. It's a choice, but also a muscle. So I think before we start thinking, okay, well, how are we going to enliven ourselves towards those 3 elements that Chris was just laying out? I think whenever I'm thinking about this term happiness, I'm always reminded of those 2 foundations that we've learned on the show. Now, when I think about, so he referenced job, referenced money, and he referenced flow. For me, I think, Mike, when I think about job, when I think about all those elements, I want to try and first of all understand where I can start to improve what I already have.
Yes.
Against what I think I really want.
Yeah.
So to start connecting where I am to maybe where I want to be and understand what is the difference.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's kind of challenging. Like, I want to enjoy more personal wealth. I want to enjoy more flow state. I want to have more moments of joy. And I think the real danger here is, like, who could disagree with those things, right?
Yeah.
So I've got a couple of thoughts I want to put to you and get your feedback. I think, first of all, they're a big continual loop. A little bit of joy from which you can build and get a little bit of money, from which you can get a bit of flow, which might bring you a little bit of joy, and the circle repeats. So I think they're very interconnected. Like, they are completely living sort of in coherence with each other. When I think about flow state, it is always doing moments of flow where you're doing something you're interested in and it's challenging. It cannot be easy. It needs to be a bit challenging, but not overwhelming. So to me, always pushing yourself to find a healthy stretch goal in an activity, be it working out, be it working, or trying to get your head around a new concept, make sure that it's a healthy stretch, not too little, not too much. Next one with money is like you might not have enough income in line with your hopes and aspirations, but you can certainly control directly how you spend what you have. And I believe living within your means is a huge step towards fulfillment. So after tax, if you're earning $1,000, then you need to make sure you're not spending more than 800. That'll give you over time the power of compound interest. You'll say, oh, wow, look at that. I'm saving a couple of $100 each and every time. And lastly, with joy, I think the big choice there is to find joy in the things around you. So when I go out in the morning and make my coffee, as I'm waiting for the coffee machine to heat up, I'll go out and I'll just enjoy the garden for a moment. I'll enjoy the dawning of a new morning. I can choose to appreciate this moment, right? Or even little things like I can enjoy a really great call or good work done with a colleague or the feeling of the soft carpet on my bare feet. These are all choices. I can be completely unpresent and experience none of that joy, or I can choose to experiencing it. So what I've quickly done is a little run through those three things. When I kind of pitch you these ways to live a more fulfilled life, as per Chris Guillebeau, what other tips and advice do you have when you hear that list?
Look, I think the other build that I could do on the healthy stretch goals is to do that self-reflection that probably needs to take place in order to really understand what it is that you're striving towards. So stretch goals, maybe that's something overarching that you're trying to work towards, or maybe it's boiled down into clear kind of actionable objectives that you can measure week on week, month on month. I think breaking those down, and this is one of the key aspects within Chris's book as well, is trying to break down those steps in coherent ways that you can then do each and every day.
Right.
So very in line, I think, with Atomic Habits, it's getting it down into a way that you can get 1% maybe better or 1% progress each and every day.
That's interesting. Okay, so yeah, so you're emphasizing go for very small stretches day on day and start with just very immediate things. And if you do it 1% better every day, you might be over a week go like, oh, I don't even notice the difference. But after a year, you'll be like, wow.
That's what I've really actually, from a personal perspective, over the last 6, 9 months, maybe, every recording that we've done, every journal entry that I put into my book on my side is thinking with that vision in mind. What is that 1% better that I'm doing today? And actually, it's a fantastic experience to then look back, whether it's reading your journal again or whatever, and thinking, hey, I have come a long way. And I think the other build, Mike, in answer to your question with regards to finding joy and gratitude yourself, like you say, going outside, the fresh air, your dog, whatever it might be, is to embrace learning, lifelong learning.
Yeah, yeah.
Really facilitate that growth mindset, again, that we've spoken about on the show many times. Because I think for me, when I'm trying to absorb new information, when I'm completing the Apollo Skills course that we were referencing a minute ago, I feel as though my brain is fully engaged and switched on. And I have gratitude for that because I know in other work that maybe I've done in the past, when I'm really distracted or anxious, I'm not really appreciating what it is that I'm physically creating,
Right.
producing, doing, getting through. And actually, when you're learning, you can sit back a little bit afterwards and think, hey, I didn't know that information before doing the course. And now I do.
Right.
Isn't it an amazing accomplishment?
Yes.
And that's a fantastic boost to your confidence and your courage, isn't it?
Yeah. No, that's a really good build on each of those things. And if you just work at each of them, you'll find that as you take a more joyful mindset, you'll be open to more wealth opportunities. You'll be open to positive, fun experiences that get you into a flow state. There's a little bit of a stretch goal there. So it really is, once again, to your point, reflecting on, am I living the life that I really want to live? Or am I harboring all of these dreams that I am not fulfilling? So it's time to break free. And I think the other thing that Chris is asking us to do is to, and this kind of goes to your last clip, is which is to break free of how we've defined work-life balance, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great segue, Mike. And I do believe that this is one of the other insights and elements of Chris's book, which is if you're going to have a life of non-conformity, you really need to, first of all, get on the same page with regards to what conformity really is.
Yes.
So this next clip that we've got, our final clip of today's show on Chris Guillebeau, is Chris going to help Chris helping us gradually understand what our desire for balance is really all about.
I've never really been interested in living a balanced life. I think balanced people don't change the world, first of all. I think balanced people don't really follow a dream, This doesn't mean that you don't have responsibilities. Like, just go to the other part of his question, how can you have a family? Well, sure, you can have a family and have, but balance is kind of like, I feel like balance is like a made-up word. It's like invented by corporations, to make their employees think that they're happy. It's like you got this balance, like you could work at Microsoft, or something here in Seattle. And
there's like 10 Microsoft people in the audience.
That's right.
Here,
No disrespect to Microsoft. Let's pick another company. Microsoft's a great company.
1 out of every 5 people in Seattle works at Microsoft.
That's right. And it's like, you got this thing, and maybe you love your job, and if you love your job, that's great. But I hear from a lot of dissatisfied people at some of these big companies, and they write in, they're like, I'm reading your blog from my cubicle, and like, I have this good job, and I've got my health insurance, I've got free yoga every Thursday. But I'm not really,
fulfilled.
Right, I'm not really fulfilled. So for me, I guess I'm much more interested in that word fulfilled. Like, how can you live a fulfilled life? And you can live a fulfilled life and still pay your bills. Lots of creative people do it. Lots of unconventional people do it. And I would say, if anything, it's actually much more common now than it used to be. When I first started working online, 15 years ago, I didn't know a lot of other people who were doing that. My friends thought I was selling drugs or something.
Well, you were.
Well, I was, but or like online gambling or whatever. Like, parents have no idea how the internet works and stuff. But now it's much more common. So I don't really like the word balance myself.
So what we'd like to do is we want to replace the word, like, living a balanced life is not the goal. Mm-hmm. The goal is living a fulfilled life.
So I guess what this really, like, when we put, I mean, it's very inspiring to challenge this sort of manufactured concept of work-life balance. Like, you can do yoga on Thursdays, as Chris said. Okay. Is that truly work-life balance? And is that what we're really looking for? Or is there something bigger? And he's proposing this idea of it's really fulfillment. So what do we think fulfillment looks like? And I would say when the majority of your day has no, he mentioned this idea of soul-sucking activities. So I'm not going to propose for any moment here that you can enjoy a life of no hardship, suffering, or soul-sucking. I think it's the ratios, right? You have to suffer a bit to get the outcome. That's for sure. So the question might be like, how much of your day is soul-sucking and how much of your day feels like satisfying, meaningful work that, and here's the key thing, work that you'd be happy to do in the evening or on the weekend if you so made that choice, right? So if you are doing work in the evening or the weekend and totally resenting that, it would be me saying, hey, that's a signal that you don't have life balance and life fulfillment because you're experiencing a soul-sucking piece of work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I think the key thing that stands out to me when you're building on this idea of the soul-sucking element, we've got to remember that suffering is good. You
Yeah.
know, if there's one consistent thing that we've learned on the Moonshot show, challenge, difficulty, suffering, hey, that's the good stuff.
Yeah.
You know, those are the opportunities if you choose to look at them where you can grow and become better, stronger, more resilient, and so on. Those are the tests, I suppose, that life throws at us. And I think this idea of balance, to build on what you've just been saying, Mike, is finding something that keeps you satisfied, that keeps you motivated,
Yeah.
so that you continually want to go out and strive to do your best, to learn the skills that maybe you don't have and that you want to get better
Yes.
at.
Yeah.
But it's also finding that balance, and the balance specifically being maybe it's difficult work, is finding the time to get into flow. You
Yeah.
know, if you're on one side of the coin finding that work is particularly difficult, but then 12 hours later or a day later you're thinking, hey, actually I'm totally in the flow. You know what? You've probably got a pretty good balance,
Correct.
because that difficult work is challenging you and you're still able to get into flow.
Yeah.
That's the perfect recipe, isn't
Yeah.
it?
So I think the symptoms of someone who's leading a fulfilling life is that you want to tell your colleagues, friends, and family about your work, about your hobby, about your experiences. That's a tell that you're energized about it. You want to share
Mm.
it, right?
Yeah.
Another tell would be that you're happy to do some work on Saturday because you're like totally into it, right?
Mm.
And you don't have a resentment. You're like, no, I want to get this
Mm.
done because this matters to me. Work and hobbies and experiences that you provide that other people are grateful for. Thank
Mm.
you for your work. It's amazing. This is great. These are all signals of fulfillment. I think on the opposite side is when you are experiencing Monday dread,
Mm.
big signal, right?
Yeah.
When you go for days upon days and you're not experiencing a sense of job well done, even if
Mm.
nobody says it to you, but you know you did good work.
Yeah.
When it's constant stress or anxiety, like if you know work is coming and you're anxious about it constantly,
Mm.
these are all tells of not leading a fulfilling life
Yeah.
because actually, you know, stress can become excitement and anticipation if it's the right work for you. It sounds challenging, but I'm pretty excited about this because I'm going to grow. I'm going
Mm.
to reach a new level. But if you're like, oh, I'm just dreading Monday. Ugh, I got to meet this person and they're the worst, right? Like these are all the
Yeah.
signals that you're not living a fulfilled life because you're
Mm.
exposing yourself. And particularly my rule would be if more than half of your day is like suffering and soul sucking moments,
Yeah.
warning, warning.
Yeah, the red light is going, the
Uh,
sirens are blaring. Because you're right. Ultimately, what Chris is pitching for to us in this book is that you don't have to live your life constantly anxious with the Monday blues. Instead, you can choose a path that's maybe a little bit less trodden, but it's one that people like Gary Vee would encourage us to,
yes,
and Mark Manson,
yes.
stop caring, to put it lightly. That's not Mark Manson's words.
Hit
Stop
up a few
caring
F's
what
there.
other,
Yeah,
yeah, the subtle art of not giving a, is to stop caring about what other people think.
yeah,
And I think that's really the core of where the art of conformity comes in.
yeah.
Be authentic to yourself. Well, first of all, figure out what it is that kind of gets you up and out of bed.
Mhm.
But also don't be afraid if the path less trodden is going to be attractive to you. Don't
Correct.
feel like you have to stick in the conformist way.
Yes, yes. Well
Mm.
said, Mark. So, Mark, we have covered four big clips and ideas from Chris Guillebeau in the art of nonconformity. What's your homework activity outside of Apollo skills? What's your homework activity? What are you going to work on from this show?
I really like the idea of balance.
Yeah.
I think really consolidating what one's personal opinion is around balance. And obviously, we heard from Chris in that clip, balance being work life. Obviously, you can find balance in a number of different elements of your life as well. But specifically for me, a work life balance, really digging into that and figuring out what it is that matters to me. I think that could be the homework, Mike.
Yeah.
What about you following today's episode?
Oh, I'm pretty with you on that
Mm.
one. Yeah, just I'm very mindful of trying to design my life and improve every day, every week, to be working on good
Mm.
work with good people that gives me a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment. You know, at 49 years of age, I can't compromise my effort. I can't defer purpose, fulfillment, and satisfaction. I got to get down and get busy, my friend.
You know what? You have reminded me and the listeners, maybe we should come up with a special 50th birthday episode.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There you go. Jeez. Jeez.
Yeah.
So, Mark, listen, big thanks to you. I really am grateful for you bringing us these four big clips that really got us thinking. I think perfect way to start the new year and the perfect way to live a life more fulfilling. So, a big thank you to you. A big thank you to our listeners, viewers, and members too, here for show 272, where we studied The Art of Non-Conformity by Chris Guillebeau. And we had four big ideas. And the first one, the ground shaker, was you don't have to live your life how others expect you to. Really big idea. It's a choice, and we all have it. And once you do that, you can ask how you can contribute and how you can live a fulfilled life with both joy, money, and flow. Do that, and you'll be on your path to redefining what balance, fulfillment, and satisfaction looks like in your life. So whether it's radically different or just a little bit special for you, it doesn't matter. You will be living the life you're meant to live. You'll be living your best life. And that's what we're all about unlocking here on the Moonshots podcast. That's a wrap.